morning, everyone. Welcome to the Metro Board activities for November 2nd. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, I'll ask our Chief Safety and Readiness Officer, Teresa Impasado, to provide today's safety contact.
Thank you,
Teresa,
Mr.
good
Chairman.
morning.
Welcome to Metro headquarters. In the event of an alarm activation, we'll exit the conference room via the glass doors and proceed into the lobby where we'll await further instructions from the security team. There is an AED located at the entry desk. Lastly, restrooms are located in the vestibule area adjacent to this conference room. With the end of daylight savings time upon us this weekend, winter is coming. For several months, Metro has been prepping for the season, making sure that the equipment and supplies that might be required to deal with snow and ice are on hand. We encourage customers traveling in cold weather to follow these safety tips. Wear appropriate clothing and shoes to walk in snow or ice. Be mindful that stations, especially those which are aerial or above ground, can feel even chillier than when you're on the ground. Take particular care of children traveling with you in inclement weather. Hold youngsters' hands when you're out and about and help them watch their steps entering and exiting stations, buses, trains, as well as getting on and off escalators. Remind children, even older youth, to approach bus stops with care as snow sometimes piles up against the curbs near where these stops and shelters are located. It's especially risky for children to play in the snow in these areas where buses and other traffic pass by. For more information on Metro service during inclement weather, follow us on social media or sign up for Metro Alerts. This concludes our safety contact.
Thank you, Ms. Impasado. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Metro Board activities. And this is the meeting of the Board's Executive Committee. Since this is our first public meeting of the day, I'll ask Ms. Ellison, the Board Corporate Secretary, to please call the roll. I'll note that we're joined by some of our alternate board members today for two important training items on the agenda. Ms. Ellison.
Chair Smedberg.
Present.
Vice Chair McAndrew. Present. Vice Chair Lowe.
Present. Director Klein.
Director Letourneau.
Present.
Director Drummer.
Present.
Alternate Director Worth. Present. Alternate Director Helfer.
Present.
Alternate Director Aguirre.
Present.
Alternate Director Goldman.
Present.
Alternate Director Rye.
Present.
Alternate Director Alcorn.
Here.
Alternate Director Graham.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. We have today's agenda before us. Are there any objections by members of the committee to the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have minutes from our October 26th meeting and executive committee session before us for approval. Are there any comments or objections to the sets of minutes presented? Hearing and seeing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. Our meeting today is a little different than in that we're starting out with two training sessions for board members. Because the trainings are required for all board members, we have some of our alternate directors with us today. Our first training session focuses on ethics. The board's code of ethics requires that each member receive ethics training annually, and today's session fulfills that requirement. It also gives board members the opportunity to ask any questions that they have of the board's ethics officer, Philip Staub. The second training session covers audit awareness. Liz Sullivan, Vice President and Chief Risk and Audit Officer, will be conducting today's training session, which will focus on the board's role and responsibilities for enterprise risk management. Following these trainings, the alternate directors will log off and/or step away from the dais and will no longer participate in the meeting. The final item on our agenda this morning is an update on progress implementing Metro's strategic transformation plan in 4 key areas: enterprise resource planning, diversity, equity and inclusion, human capital, and procurement. Now I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Staub, the board's Chief Ethics Officer, for our first item. Mr. Staub. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. As you just stated, I am here to cover the required annual ethics training under the Board Code of Ethics. I'll be covering these sort of principal ethics topics that you see here. And at the end, we'll do a few scenarios to make the training a little more practical. So first of all, to whom do board members owe their fiduciary duties. Under the compact, WMATA is an agency of the signatories and a body corporate. So the fiduciary duties are owed both to WMATA and to the respective jurisdiction from which the board member comes. The code goes further and breaks down the fiduciary duties into these 4 separate duties of loyalty, confidentiality, care, and avoid conflict of interest. These are all defined, so we're going to take one at a time. First of all, the duty of loyalty states to act in the best interest of WMATA and of your jurisdiction in good faith, and do so objectively and independently. In sum, this means putting your jurisdiction and metro first before any other interests. Duty of confidentiality states that board members will keep confidential all non-public information learned through your board service. The board is provided non-public information such as personnel information or negotiation strategy, and this duty requires that to be kept confidential. The release of this information could result in statutory violations or loss of attorney-client privilege, for instance. The duty of care is to act with appropriate attention and be fully apprised of all reasonably available information. I view this as sort of the due diligence fiduciary duty. So when participating in a member will attend board meetings, review board materials, ask questions, and gather information to make an informed decision. And finally, the duty to avoid conflicts of interest. We'll get into specific rules about conflicts of interest from the Code of Ethics shortly, but there is also this broad fiduciary duty to avoid any action to diminish the public's confidence in the integrity of the board or of WMATA. This is a broad statement of what would be a conflict of interest, such as using your board position for favored treatment of any person or for personal gain, or to solicit gifts or anything of value in connection with your service as a board member. The Code of Ethics does have more specific rules about conflicts of interest. So first of all, how is a conflict of interest defined in the code? And I suggest that this is best viewed in 2 parts. First of all, a conflict of interest exists when a board member's ability to perform their duties fairly and objectively would be compromised. That is what I would say is the main definition, the touchstone. Then there's an example that conflicts include but are not limited to when a board member has a substantial interest or duty in an interested party. So let's break that down a little bit. First of all, substantial interest or duty. These are defined in the code. They are things like financial interests and duties to others. Interested parties are entities that have or are seeking business with Metro or have interests that can be directly affected by Metro decisions such as you make here at the board. So for example, if a board member's spouse works for a WMATA vendor, that would be a conflict of interest. I should have already stated that the household members' interests are treated as if they are yours. So in the example I just gave, the spouse's employment would be considered your interest, and a vendor is an interested party. That would be under that second definition I talked about, the substantial interest or duty and interested party. Now, if a board member's, let's say, brother, who does not live in the same household, worked for the Metro vendor, that would still be a conflict of interest. Although it's not a substantial duty or interest, it would be something that would be viewed as compromising the board member's ability to perform their duties fairly and objectively. So it would be a conflict of interest for that reason. So once you have a conflict of interest, what do? Well, first of all, you report it. And I recommend you also seek ethics guidance. Then, if a matter comes before the board involving that interest, so in the example I gave, that vendor, then you need to take some action. There are two courses of action available to board members under the code. First of all, recusal. And secondly, making a declaration in lieu of recusal. So recusal is completely at the board member's discretion. They can make that decision on their own. It does not require any approval. They just need to notify the chair of the committee or of the board considering the matter. And under recusal, naturally, the board member does not participate. Participate includes not just discussion in this room, but any form of participation, including discussions outside this room. So that's recusal. Declaration in lieu of recusal is when a board member feels that they can still participate fairly and objectively, notwithstanding the conflict. That requires a few more steps. So hopefully involves some advanced planning. First of all, the board member would approach the ethics officer to get a recommendation, and with that recommendation, seek board approval. That's a vote in open session. And then that would be read into the record at the beginning of the session, and the board member would in fact participate in the matter. I just want to mention that neither of these apply if we're talking about a conflict of interest under the compact. I haven't touched on that much, but there is a provision in the compact relating to conflicts of interest. That needs to be ameliorated separately. It's not something that can be relieved through a recusal or a declaration. I'll move on. I'm happy to take questions at any point, by the way, but I will continue now with gifts. There's a general rule in our code of ethics against soliciting or accepting gifts from a prohibited source. You notice I'm using a different term there than I used before. Prohibited source, not just interested party. Prohibited source is covers the same entities as interested parties. So again, someone or a business that is seeking or is doing business with Metro or can be affected by Metro decisions, but also includes when a gift is being given, the circumstances indicate that it's due to the board member's position at Metro. So for instance, if the board was approached with an invitation to come to a dinner or something like that, that would suggest that the giver is singling out board members and therefore would be considered a prohibited source. So against this general rule, we have some exceptions that permit accepting gifts. They're in Appendix 1 to the Code of Ethics, but they are somewhat complex in application. I recommend that you seek ethics guidance when applying them. Our rules require disclosure of all gifts to interested parties. That's something I don't want to leave any confusion about. The exceptions do not mean an exception to reporting. They mean an exception that allows you to accept the gift. They still need to be reported. And I have a bullet here on household members. That's so I remember to tell you that gifts to household members, just like conflicts or substantial duties and interests, are considered your own. And lastly, before we get to some scenarios, your disclosure obligations. We have the annual disclosure statement. That's generally conducted in the spring. In addition, board members have an obligation to update their disclosure regarding any changes to their interests within 10 days of learning of that change. As I mentioned, there's also the gift disclosure for any gifts from prohibited sources. Okay, I have 3 scenarios today to help us sort of make these rules more practical. In the first, the board member talks about the Tunnel Construction Association has invited the member to a meeting to discuss alternatives for improving Blue Orange Silver Line capacity and reliability, and asks, do I need to disclose that I plan to attend? The answer is yes. The Tunnel Construction Association is likely or certainly could be an interested party, and I would recommend that it be considered so, and likely there will also be interested parties in attendance at this meeting, the membership of the association. So the board members should update their disclosure to report the meeting with a brief summary of the topics covered at the meeting. And then should matters regarding the Blue Orange Silver Line come to the board members should consult with the ethics officer about the need to make a declaration in order to participate in matters that were discussed. Now, I do want to offer a change in facts in this scenario, a question I sometimes get. What if instead of attending this meeting as a board member, the individual attended in their personal or business capacity? The guidance there would be to treat the matter the same way ethically. But in addition, board member would want to make it clear at the meeting that they are there in their personal capacity, not as a Metro board member. Okay, in scenario 2, the board member's spouse is a tax attorney and provides charities with guidance on maintaining their tax-exempt status. And the question is, could this be a conflict of interest? And the answer is yes, if a charity for which the spouse provides services is an interested party. Now, let me go through this step by step. First of all, the spouse is a household member automatically under our definition. And household member interests are imputed to the board member. So a conflict of interest, one of those definitions is when there's a substantial duty or interest in an interested party. In this case, the substantial duty or interest is the spouse's employment. And as I said, if a charity is an interested party, then it would meet the definition of a conflict. For instance, the charity could be involved in a joint promotion event with Metro, and there could be an agreement between us that would fulfill that definition. The board member would need to report this conflict and get ethics guidance on what they should do should a matter affecting the charity come before the board of directors. Last scenario I have for you, we always have an APTA scenario because there's a lot of activity usually against the APTA annual conference. Here's sort of a common situation. The board member is talking about being invited to a cocktail hour after the first day of the conference. The cocktail hour is hosted by an electric bus manufacturer that is not doing business with Metro. Is this a gift from a prohibited source? And the answer here is the lawyer's favorite. It depends. This is a good situation for us to talk about. Because I've thrown in here that this particular electric bus manufacturer is not doing business with Metro. So they may not be an interested party, but we don't have quite enough information here to be sure about that because remember, interested party includes business seeking to do business with Metro, so they could fall in that category. Or they could be affected by Metro decisions, even though they're not currently a vendor, such as if the board is about to make a decision that could affect whether their buses will be used by Metro or not. But of course, prohibited source includes more than interested parties. It includes um, a gift that's being given under circumstances that make it appear as if the board member is being offered it because of their position at Metro. That could also be the case here. So we would discuss all this and decide whether it's a gift from prohibited source. And then, of course, whether the board member is interested in accepting it. Does it meet an exception? Let's make sure it's reported. We would handle all of that in the ethics guidance.
Phil, before you move on from that.
Absolutely.
So we have a cocktail hour or reception. Could you talk a little bit about something sort of discreet with a small group of invitees versus inviting a much larger all the participants, or
right.
A vast majority of the participants, say at a conference or a meeting?
Your question, I think, hits on whether an exception applies that would allow the gift to be accepted. So let's just assume in this scenario we decide the bus manufacturer is a prohibited source. So it's a gift from a prohibited source. The board member wants to attend because it's a good thing for Metro. And so we need to look at whether there's an exception. And really the most likely exception we will use is the widely attended gatherings. So if this were an event that was widely advertised to all attendees and open to everybody, that is more likely to meet that exception. There are a few other requirements that we ought to talk about. There's also, on the other hand, let's say it's small attendees and it is held, as in this example, outside of the normal program. Those are both indicators that it's not a widely attended gathering. I actually have a questionnaire that I can send to, in this case, I would send to the electric bus manufacturer to discover whether it meets that exception or not. So we gather the information, not only what we know readily, but we from the host as well, to decide whether it meets an exception or not.
I think in general, is it fair to say it's best to side on caution in all of this, regardless if it's a widely distributed invite, just to sort of let you know about it, just because.
Yeah, I don't like being the board downer, but I will never, it's true, I will never argue with a board member who errs on the side of caution when it comes to ethics.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's, in the past, it's, we've had some issues.
Yeah.
And, so it is best to err on the side of caution.
Especially if you don't have the facts. If something comes up
Right.
very late and you're really not sure one way or the other, of course, you can always contact me or reach out to the general counsel, but if we don't have enough information, that is a great place to err on the side of caution.
Thank you.
Sure. So to wrap up, of course, there's much more to the Code of Ethics. I encourage you, therefore, to review it when you get the opportunity. But as I mentioned, both the General Counsel and I are available to provide ethics advice. Many ethics situations are complex, and we're happy to help out with those. And as we were just saying, with erring on the side of caution, another version of that is where we always like to end, like the rule of real estate, location, location, location. The rule of ethics is disclose, disclose, disclose. There is really no way of going wrong with providing transparency, which is, an underlying current of ethics.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to turn to the people on the screen there first. Walter, your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Phil, appreciate all this. Can you go back to scenario 1 in your slides? Yeah, thanks. Question about this. What if the meeting is actually, what if you're invited to the meeting with Randy Clark and the Tunnel Construction Association? Would we still need to disclose that meeting?
Yes, I think I recognize the point you're making, that you're doing something in the course of your board member duties. I would go back to that, disclose. It's always worth indicating that you've had this meeting, in part because that transparency will help later should there be any question that your participation in a matter involving the capacity and reliability was somehow colored by the Tunnel Construction Association meeting.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thank you. I'll need to think about that a little bit because some of this may be getting into more of the open meetings as opposed to, the conflict of interest, but, okay. That might be something as a board might want to talk about later.
Yeah,
Thank you.
as I should add that, like I was saying, not all situations are that obvious. If you're talking about, I mean, here, the guidance is largely in order to provide that transparency. If the transparency is already there because it's a well-publicized metro event, then the need to disclose is obviated.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Phil.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Walter. Michael, Tom, Kinnick, Matthew, any questions, comments? Okay. Anyone in the room?
Good.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I hear someone? No. Okay. Philip, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And I think everyone has your email address.
Yes.
And thank you.
And phone number.
Yeah, and thank you for your work throughout the year. It really is helpful. So really appreciate it. Who's your next?
Mr. Chair, should we leave now?
No. This is the second one, Tom.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we still got to do this training.
Hey, it's nice to see you, by the way. Yes, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. As the Chairman noted earlier, my name is Elizabeth Sullivan. I'm the Vice President and Chief Risk and Audit Officer with Audit and Compliance here at Metro. It's my pleasure to be with the Executive Committee and the whole board as we go over our annual training and audit awareness, focused on our board responsibilities for internal controls and risk management, or enterprise risk management in general. We have two main objectives for our training session today. One is to increase awareness of internal controls and risk management. We'll meet this objective by examining, or I should say re-examining, the definition of internal controls and going over some key concepts for internal control as well as concepts for risk management. Our second objective, which is the focus of our session today, will be to talk specifically about board role and responsibilities for internal control as well as risk management. We'll talk through this by going through the structure available from the 5 components of our internal control framework, along with the 17 principles, all of which we'll talk about here shortly. So to begin our discussion, it's important to note that a strong internal control environment starts with an organization's board of directors as well as senior management. A very clear understanding of the expectations of internal control and risk management provides the boards with the tool it needs to exercise its oversight responsibility, to hold management appropriately accountable for expectations for internal control, as well as to ensure that there is a sense of effectiveness when it comes to internal controls and risk management. This, of course, includes evaluating and considering risk mitigating activities, as well as other risk responses that are appropriate. A strong internal control environment also includes the ongoing management of risk. So if I may direct the board's attention to the definition of internal control that we have here shown on the screen. And as you consider these definitions, here are some key concepts to think about. Internal control is what we call a process. It's a process consisting of ongoing tasks and activities. Internal control in itself is not, it's a means to an end, not in itself an end. Internal controls are effected by people, starting with our board of directors. Internal control is not merely about the policies and procedures or the systems or forms of things that may in themselves represent internal control, but it's about the people and the action they take at every level within the organization. Internal control gives us what we call reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, which in fact acknowledges the limitations of internal control. And one very important thing to note, internal control is everyone's responsibility. We're talking about here, there's a role for the board. We may have different levels of accountability and different roles when it comes to internal control, but we absolutely have a collective responsibility. Some other things that might not be as apparent with the definition. Internal control is adaptable rather in structure. It's applicable and it should be flexible and it's applicable in its application. That's the word. It could be applied at different levels to the entire entity, for example, to a subdivision, to a specific business unit, or to a specific business process. So it should be flexible in its application. In terms of the different types of internal control that may exist, they could be hard or soft. An example of a soft control would be a lock, for example, to a door that prevents inappropriate access. That would be a hard control. Or a policy, for example, an ethics policy, ethics training just continued. That could be a soft control, but a control all the same. Internal controls will vary in their sense of precision. An example would be a verification required, a form of control, or a recalculation required in an accounting process. Again, a form of control, varying in their level of precision. Internal controls could be directive in nature, as in, again, a policy is a directive control. Internal controls could be preventive in nature. An example of that in our environment currently is the prepayment review process currently in an accounts payable organization within the accounting department, which allows us to review vendor payments for cost principles, compliance prior to payment. That is a preventive control, something we do ahead of perhaps something occurring. Internal controls could also be detective in nature. An example of that would be, for example, reviewing the entry logs or access logs to a location from the prior month to ensure compliance with expected policies in that scenario. Internal controls can also be corrective in nature. The value for internal control is certainly in the definition there that we had a moment ago, in that it is geared towards the accomplishment of objectives. So what we're really saying is if we were to have clearly articulated objectives, whether they be strategic objectives or performance objectives, as long as we can identify the risks to those objectives, the risks to meeting them, then we can properly design controls to mitigate those risks. And when placed into operation properly, then we would have that reasonable assurance that our objectives would be met. So now I'd like to mention briefly some regulatory expectations for internal control. The Uniform Guidance from OMB provides the requirements for receiving and using federal awards. This includes specific requirements for internal control. What's required there in Section 303 is that non-federal entities like WMATA are expected to establish and maintain effective internal control that provide reasonable assurance that the entity will manage federal awards in compliance with federal statutes, regulations, terms and conditions of the award. Internal controls are expected to be compliant with standards and frameworks, some of which we'll talk about here shortly. And these known standards are the two that we'll speak about here. In addition to the OMB standard, we also have the FTA Circular 5010, which requires us to also establish internal controls in our environment. So here are those standards we spoke about. The one to the left, my left, is the standards for internal controls in the federal government issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. Some of you may be familiar with this. It's sometimes referred to as the Green Book. And then, of course, to the right, we have the Internal Control Integrated Framework issued by the sponsoring organization, the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Trade Commission, or COSO. These are both well-recognized frameworks for internal control, very similar. They both have components and principles, all of which guide us in terms of our roles and responsibilities for internal control. And they also are, the main difference here is that the Green Book is mainly designed for the federal government. Again, very similar. Now, our COSO framework, which is 5 components and the 17 explicit principles, guide us in terms of what our responsibilities should be. All 17 principles are expected to be present and functional and working in an integrated manner. So to facilitate our discussion around board responsibility for internal control, we'll talk through these 5 components and the principles that are applicable. We'll focus, of course, on what those principles say in terms of the board oversight responsibility. So our first component, control environment. Control environment is the foundation for all components of internal control, providing discipline, process, and structure as established by the board of directors as well as senior management. The standards and structures set by control environment provide a basis for carrying out all other controls. So this is the foundation, as we mentioned. The board of directors and senior management establish the tone at the top, and also this tone at the top helps to understand expectations regarding expanded standards of conduct. As you see those 5 principles offered by this component, please let's examine some of the board responsibilities that the standards, these 5 principles offer us. And as you take a look at them as listed, expectations for the board is that the board establish oversight structures aligned with the objectives of the organization, establish integrity and ethical values. The board has taken the lead in that and taken ethics training annually, certainly something that's expected even of those of us in the organization. The board oversees the definition of how these standards of conduct within the organization should be set. The board also ensures or develops expectations for competency across the organization, because competency allows the optimal performance of control activities. In addition, the board maintains accountability structures for itself as well as members of management. The board also commissions oversight reviews to ensure that objectives are being met. Moving on to our second component, risk assessment. Risk assessment covers the identification and analysis of relevant risks to the achievement of an organization's objective and forms the basis of how risks should be managed. A precondition for risk assessment is the establishment of clearly defined objectives, as we stated earlier. And this has to happen at various levels throughout the organization to enable the identification and really the management of risk. Risk assessment component requires management to consider the impact and the possibility of change given internal and external factors. Risk does not stay the same. There's always changes in our environment, things that we have to consider when it comes to risk. So the 4 principles of this component offers us the following board responsibilities. Again, as you take a look at these, the board should oversee management's assessment of risk to the achievement of the objectives, evaluate potential impact, again, of significant change, of potential fraud, or perhaps what we call management override, which would be sidestepping established controls. The board should question these things. The board should consider these factors that could pose a significant risk to the achievement of objectives and ensure that management is doing the same. The board is also responsible for determining how proactively the organization is managing innovations. We know about AI and so many things that are happening in our environment. How is management approaching that? Questions the board should be seeking to understand. The board should also ensure that management is thinking in terms of changes that are triggered by things like technology, like I just mentioned, budgetary changes, as well as political shifts. Our next component, control activities, offers 3 principles. Control activities are the policies and procedures which helps ensure that management's directives are carried out. They help ensure the necessary actions are taken to address risks to the achievement of an organization's objectives. Control activities should be performed at various stages within the organization and should include various types of internal controls. We spoke earlier on that they could vary in precision, they could vary in type. The other thing is we have to ensure that control activities also cover technology. So in these different forms of control, whether they're detective or preventive, manual or automated, that suggests that they are computer aided or technology aided. A strong control environment contains various different controls, and that's what makes it important, makes it strong. All right, so here are those 3 principles. Here are the responsibilities, the board responsibilities offered by our framework, given those three principles. The board should provide oversight to management in the development and performance of controls. The board should make specific inquiries of management regarding how management is selecting these controls that allows them to manage risk to an acceptable level, how those are developed and deployed across the different areas of the organization, especially those that represent a significant area of risk. Moving on to our fourth component, information and communication with its three principles. Information and communication involves the identification, capture, and communication of data, pertinent business information in a form and time frame that enables the organization to carry out its responsibilities. Communication should be in a form and manner that helps information flow throughout the organization, upwards, downwards, really throughout the organization, throughout the ranks and the different persons across the organization responsible to carry out control activities. It certainly also addresses inbound and outbound information necessary for the business, to conduct the business. Here are the roles and responsibilities for the board as outlined by our fourth component. The board should communicate direction and tone at the top. The board should obtain and discuss information relating to the achievement of objectives, review disclosures to external parties for completeness, relevance, and accuracy, as well as address and make sure that there is upward communication to the board. Our fifth and final component, control activities. Control activities help ensure that internal controls continue to operate, monitoring activities rather. Monitoring activities ensure that internal controls continue to operate effectively and involves ongoing assessments. It also ensures that these activities are done at different timelines to ensure that they're not only right ones, but they continue to be right, hence the monitoring aspect of it. Separate evaluations would also vary in scope and frequency based on assessed risk. Here are the board roles and responsibilities when it comes to monitoring activities. The board should assess and oversee the nature and scope of these activities, ensure the management override controls are clear, there's understanding in terms of that when it in fact happens. The board should also evaluate remediation of deficiencies and the timeliness of that. The executive committee is well familiar with this, as we know, the responsibility to review information from audit and compliance, as well as the Office of Inspector General. So these are things that I'm sure as you take a look at them, you would agree are both role and responsibilities. So kind of shifting focus here, we are not able to talk about internal controls without speaking about risks, because risks, internal controls are designed typically to manage risks to an acceptable level. We mentioned earlier on that internal controls are geared towards the achievement of objectives. Well, so is risk management in itself. So similar to risk management, we'll just talk about some concepts. Similar to internal controls, we'll talk about some concepts of risk management. So the reality is this: whether you are a for-profit organization or not, a governmental agency or otherwise, we all exist to provide value to our stakeholders, and all entities face risk in pursuit of value. For Metro, of course, that value is our mission to connect people to possibilities safely, reliably, as well as equitably, and of course, in an affordable manner. So risk by definition is the possibility that events would occur and affect the achievement of strategy and business objectives, which may be, of course, positive or negative. You may have heard about the upside of risk. So a lot of times we hear risk, there's an assumption that risk is negative. Risk could be explored to create more value aimed at meeting our objectives, and that's the whole point here. Building on the definition for risk, we have enterprise risk management. And as you know, we've talked about this before, it is a process that allows an organization to, on an ongoing basis, identify, evaluate, and manage risks that could significantly disrupt the successful achievement of mission and objectives. So there are three different definitions there, and whichever one you might find more familiar or to be more clear, the bottom line is they all speak to one thing. It supports an organization in meeting its objectives. So enterprise risk management is those cultures and capabilities and practices that an organization integrates with developing and carrying out strategy, as well as ensuring that the whole portfolio of risks facing the organization is properly managed. Here are some benefits that we've talked about as well before for managing risk at that enterprise level. Specifically, risk management is important to the success of any organization. It improves decision-making, supports allocation of resources based on risk, and it encourages open communication about significant risks. When we engage with our business partners and we're talking to them about risk, what we always tell them is you can't manage a secret. So the fact that we're open and transparent in our sense of being risk aware and able to speak about risk, that in itself is not a weakness, it's in fact a strength. So certainly talking about risk or managing risk is just purely good business practice. So we've already shared information about our enterprise risk management in the past, so we're not going to go over those in detail today, but because we're speaking about the board role and responsibility for risk, we want to assure you that management acknowledges that primary responsibility it has to manage risk. With that, we have our enterprise risk management program that establishes the standards, the processes, and accountability structure to consistently identify, assess, respond to, through mitigating actions and other risk responses, and monitor significant risks across Metro. We identify risk formally, annually, at least annually, in response to change or changes in the business internally or externally. Risks are identified, aligned at the entity level or at enterprise level, which is where we have those most pervasive risks that could significantly impact the accomplishment of our objectives. Or what we call the process level, we look at risks there. We talked about risks have to be identified and assessed at different levels in the organization. Our current program allows us to do just that. So at that process level, we look at risks that emanate from business processes, which are a collection of related and structured activities that occur throughout the organization, usually at the department and office levels. Another level in which we approach risk is we look at it from a specific or special focus area. This is where we look at risks that either were identified to be a special focus, they ascend to a special focus because of a concern, or they're event-driven, for example. One of that could be like a fraud risk assessment or a project risk assessment or a vendor risk assessment. So we look at risk at different levels, identify them across our 6 functional areas. So we have what we call a composite view of risk across the organization. We also align them to appropriate business categories, risk categories. All right, so now we'll shift and talk now about board role responsibility exactly as it relates to risk management. So the board has this oversight responsibility, like within the case of internal control, also for risk management, which includes assessing the appropriateness of the entity's strategy in alignment to its mission, vision, values, as well as related risks to accomplishing these objectives. As part of this oversight role, the board should encourage management to think about inherent risks to the business. We should be well aware of these risks because we have to manage risk as part of managing the business. The board should ensure that management is thinking about risks in terms of performance. So we know that there are various levels of performance, but that's also based on the various levels of risk. There is a combination of performance and the risk-taking and resulting performance. So that balance is what we seek to find, the right balance between expected performance and the amount of risk an organization is willing to take. So speaking about the board roles and responsibilities specifically listed there, the board is expected to, again, to manage risks to the achievement of objectives, review and approve, challenge, or concur with management when it deems appropriate, whether or not management has taken the right or proposed the right strategy, or is management seeking to manage risk within the right set of risk appetite. The board should discuss and understand risk appetite and consider whether it aligns with its expectation. Risk appetite, again, is that type and amount of risk an organization is willing to accept in pursuit of its objectives. The board should also consider and ensure that management's doing the same internal and external factors, just like in the case of internal control, same for risk that may impact the achievement of objectives. How is management proactively managing risks, again, around innovation? These are the things that the board should think about. Very similar to what the board will consider when it comes specifically to internal controls. All right, so as we wrap up our session, as we think about board role and responsibility, it's a good question to reflect on. What kind of questions are we asking, or rather, are we asking the right questions when it comes to risk? One of the things I wanted to mention and just bring out is information that's here on our next slide, which is the North American Perspectives of Risk. This details were included in your package before for this meeting. The committee may have noticed that similar to information that we shared previously about risk trends in the transit industry, which was compiled by my colleagues and I with the APTA Committee of Audit Professionals, you may have noticed that cybersecurity and human capital are among the highest rated risks in North America, according to the research. The research information I'm sharing with you is based on information from the Internal Audit Foundation's Risk in Focus 2024 report series. And this Risk in Focus provides practical, data-driven research prepared to help us understand today's risk environment as we plan for the year ahead. So this research, it's important to note that it also looked at risk globally, not just in North America, and has similar trends globally in terms of cybersecurity and human capital being the highest risks based on that research. We are also mentioning here the importance of board role and responsibility, again, acknowledging that the management team takes that role, their primary roles, our primary role seriously as well. Also contained in your package is a list of our current sense of top risk that we're considering here internally for the organization. We also offer that for your consideration as we continue to work through it internally as a management team. Again, to confirm that we are also thinking in terms of our responsibility for risk as well. So in summary for our training session today, here are some takeaways. Managing risk and internal control collectively is an important part of any success of any organization. The board has oversight responsibility for both risk and internal control as part of that broader enterprise risk management expectation and responsibility of the board. As part of this responsibility, when it comes to risk, the board should review, challenge, and concur when appropriate with management's proposed strategy, management's sense of risk appetite, which again should be something that the board should be interested in and ask about. What are the types and amounts of risk that an organization that we, Metro, are willing to take? The board should also, when it comes to control, commission oversight reviews and ensure that it's looking to see what remediating actions are being taken over time and monitoring those actions. The board should also evaluate the impact of change, make specific inquiries of management, communicate direction at the top, obtain and analyze relevant information, and oversee in general management's actions taken to monitor risk and controls. Management has the primary responsibility, but there is the shared responsibility, which is an oversight one on this part of the board. So this concludes my presentation, my training session today, sir, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be happy to take questions from members of the committee and the board.
Thank you, Liz. I'll first turn to people on the phone and on camera. Anyone have a question or comment for Liz? Okay. Anyone in the room? No. Thank you very much. And I'm sure, Liz, the same goes for you. If people have a question or have a concern about an area or any of these topics, that you're obviously available anytime to
Absolutely, always
take their
available.
comments or listen to their concerns. So,
Yes,
great.
always available for that.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Now we'll move on to our next topic, the strategic transformation plan. Can we get people inside? Yep.
Is that our cue to leave?
So I'm gonna also note that that Bryna and Spring are staying on as they are representing their primary principals, and we thank the other alternates for joining us today. So appreciate it. Tom, great seeing you. Nick.
Good to see you as well.
All
Take
right.
care.
Take care. Okay, we're ready. Yeah, let's go. Yep. Who's Kimmy? Are you kicking us off here? Or? What's that? No, we can start. Yeah. Good morning.
Okay.
Good morning, Committee Chair and members of the committee and board. I am Kimmy Feldbauer, Metro's Director of Strategic Transformation and Enterprise Collaboration. Back in February, when you adopted the Strategic Transformation Plan, one of our commitments was to provide regular updates on the various initiatives across the organization that are delivering on our strategic plan and contributing to Metro's organizational transformation. Today, we're here to provide an update on several initiatives contributing to overall enterprise transformation, delivering on strategic plan, Your Metro, the way forward. Our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Yutunde Olumude, will walk us through an update of our new ERP system. Our Chief Diversity Officer, Ms. Darlene Slaughter, will provide an overview of our DE&I action plan. And then we'll conclude with an overview of a few sprint efforts we're undertaking at Metro to identify pain points in our business functions where we can offer solutions for process and cost efficiencies. You'll hear from our Chief People Officer, Ms. Sherry Dickerson, for an overview of our human capital sprint, and then our Chief Procurement Officer, Ms. Suzette Moore. With that, I will hand it over to Ms. Olumude to kick things off.
Thank you. All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Yetunde Olumide, Chief Financial Officer and Executive Vice President. This morning, I'll present the new Enterprise Resource Planning ERP program. I'll define the program and review some significant benefits which align with Metro's strategic transformation plan. ERP is an integrated software system designed to effectively manage an organization from talent management, acquisition, training, and development to accounting, procurement, grants, and financial analysis. Today, ERP systems are comprehensive, a lot of tasks done formally on spreadsheets, and documents outside the system can now be automated and integrated into a single application to improve efficiency. The ERP modernization program will replace Metro's legacy PeopleSoft system and implement a human capital system, including applicant tracking, workforce management, and learning management. It'll also include financial systems, accounting, procurement, asset management, grants and funds management, capital funding, and treasury functions. ERP system will be a cloud-based to easily support ease of regular upgrades and security and accessibility through mobile applications. The current legacy ERP system is outdated and is being sunsetted by PeopleSoft. There are multiple areas for Metro to improve. The current system, while functioning, has too many manual processes and segregated data. The new system will provide for more efficiencies and improved data transparency for increased data-driven decision-making. Workforce management is also a priority for Metro. Thus, an important facet of the system is talent management, with applicant tracking to increase recruiter visibility, as well as improved learning management. Further, it will be set up with user-friendly tools for stakeholders, ranging from employees to vendors working with procurement. Data compliance and security have always been a priority for Metro. The new system will ensure Metro continues to meet evolving security needs as well. Finally, it is integrated a cloud system that is more user-friendly, ready for regular technology upgrades and maintenance, resulting in cost efficiencies. We recognize the current system has many limitations. Our goal is a streamlined business system that minimizes manual processes and provides complex analytics and increased data integration. Throughout the implementation, whenever we're evaluating critical pathways, these 5 guiding principles will be used to keep decisions focused on the goal. So does the option balance risk and progress? Does it focus on the future? Are we adopting leading practices? Keeping these principles in front of us will ensure the ERP system aligns with the best outcome. The current legacy system version of PeopleSoft doesn't meet today's technological needs. Many processes are handled, as I said earlier, manually and in Excel and numerous workarounds. It lacks full integration and is not efficient. Further, we built custom modules which are difficult to maintain in today's environment. The new platform will be a simplified system that consolidates processes and supports complex analytical reporting tools. This new system will provide automation that streamlines our processes, ranging from hiring critical talent to contract management processes. The ERP program aligns with all 4 pillars of the strategic transformation plan. Financial sustainability is a core element. ERP modernization will reduce manual processes with automation, increasing flexibility. It will also integrate operating and capital financials across all platforms, resulting in business intelligence to efficiently manage financial resources and provide better visibility. Concerning talented teams, the new system will includes industry-leading solutions for talent acquisition tracking, workforce management, and enterprise learning applications. It includes user-friendly tools as well for employees that will be available on mobile applications, increasing accessibility and efficiency to all employees. On service excellence, external stakeholders will see multiple improvements when working with Metro. For example, suppliers will experience a smoother procurement process. And finally, concerning regional opportunity and partnership, complex critical data analytics will increase visibility and data transparency as well. All right. So Metro has competitively selected Oracle Fusion as a software system and their consulting team as our implementation partner as we proceed. The next step is the design phase, in which we review all the current processes to design the new system configuration. This is followed by implementation of a cloud system and then data integration and user testing. It will be completed in phases with modules going live at separate times. It will take approximately 30 to 36 months to complete the entire process. Well, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation, and we'll take any questions you may have at this time.
Any questions from committee members first? Yeah. Yeah. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
so Yetunde, one.
We appreciate the support.
So Yetunde, I have a question for you and Jed. So how are your 2 departments, given that this is basically a software thing too, how are your 2 departments? All 3. Oh,
So-
well, all 3, Sherry.
All 3 of us, yeah. So,
how are you coordinating this? Are you know, I'm assuming you have folks in a bigger grinder?
No, thank you for your question, Mr. Chairman. We're literally joined at the hip on this. We represent the Executive Steering Committee, and we work really closely with the other senior executives and their teams. The Project Management Office is under formulation right now, and it includes members from every department across the entire organization, with leads from each of our teams steering the process forward.
Okay. And one last question for me. Talk a little bit about the procurement side of things, you know, how that all works into this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Sherry sees that.
Absolutely. So lots of benefits here on the procurement side, also on the human capital side. I think Sherry is the most excited of all of us. Um, but on the procurement side specifically, just ensuring that our vendors, as we go through the procurement process, have some level of visibility into where they are in the process, and ensuring that we have that constant communication back and forth, and it's transparent for all to see. This also increases the amount of visibility we have in-house with folks who are procuring different items from, tires to rail cars, and everything else in between. We're working on that now, and we have some dashboards we've built internally at this time, but the ERP system will enhance what we have currently.
And what about the importance of the PeopleSoft program, given what it covers? How long is that transition? How is that going to be handled?
I'll take that.
Because that, just because of the information that it contains and everything, what?
As part of the implementation, we're looking at how basically the data migration, so the data from our old system into our new system, but we'll run PeopleSoft concurrently with as we roll out modules of the new system. So our priority in the rollout is human capital. And so as we move to Oracle Fusion Human Capital, we'll start to deprecate our old PeopleSoft system, and then migrate that data.
And given the complexity of some of this, you're pretty confident with the 30 and 36 month timeline.
What about paper HR records?
Well, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but yeah.
At this point in the project, we're pretty confident with the time frame. In fact, there's some opportunities for us to shorten it a little bit, but right now I think we're pretty confident in the 30 to 36 months.
Okay. And Sherry, what about Tracy's comment about the paper copies? Are they going to be digitized, or they just stay copies?
It's not as easy to access the data as we would like. There's still some legacy requirements about maintaining paper that we need to make sure that we are clear on, especially when it comes to immigration paperwork and some other paperwork that we have. So it's a little work to be done.
All right. Go ahead.
I just have one comment, Mr. Chair. So, in our business, we tend to focus on bus and rail and metro access and the stuff on the street. And those are really, that is our core of what we do. We get excited about new trains and zero emission buses and ridership. I will say, from an organization, though, this is equal to any other major thing we are doing and critically important. So I know the board knows that. So we need to stay on top of this. We need this to run well. Hence the charter that we have with 3 very experienced executives who've all been through ERP processes at other places, which is really good. We have arguably the best team you can get in the world on this, that they make the product that people use. So we're really excited about that team. But this is a critical piece that we have to get right because it drives the entire organization. So again, not sexy, but really, really critical. So our goal here is to keep the board probably at an annual update. But we just really want to get in front of the board and, really excited about the transparency this will bring to the organization long term, which will lead the board and other stakeholders to have better policy making decisions in the long term.
Yeah, I hear the cheering from the Inspector General's office from here. I think that's that sound.
Well, and beyond an annual update, if there are milestones we hit, it would be really great to hear about them.
Absolutely, we'll be back to share updates with the board.
Because some of this is pretty major work. So obviously, quite a bit of it is. But,
It is, and we're really excited and looking forward to it.
all right. She says with that calm, monotone voice. All right. All righty. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, everyone. With no further business.
Next topic.
Yeah, that was part 1.
Oh, the 4. That's right. The ERP. That's right. They're not all integrated. Sorry. Yeah. So we have Darlene.
Yeah, so joining us next for the next update of the transformation program is Ms. Darlene Slaughter, our Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer.
and then I'll click the slide. So I'm going to go briefly through the DEI program, and I'm excited to be here. I'm going into my 8th month now, so yes, a lot of good things happening at Metro. And so the purpose of this presentation is just to talk to you a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what we're going to do, and also to let you know that this supports the strategic transformation plan across the board. So we fall under talented teams, but we actually fall into everything with everybody from the top to the bottom in the organization. So what is diversity, equity, and inclusion? That's a big question that I get here in the organization. And diversity is really about the practice of including. How do we count numbers? Who's in the room, right? Who has a seat at the table? And that's around race or ethnicities or your abilities or religions and cultures. And so here I talk a lot about while Metro is a United States-based organization, we are a global organization because of the workforce that we have. We have people from all over the world who work here. So we have a lot of different customs and cultures and languages, and that we really need to embrace all of the people who are here. From the equity standpoint, we talk about the consistent and systematic things that we do, what's fair, what's just, how are people treated, right? So when we talk about fairness doesn't mean equality where we do everything for everybody or we do the same thing for everybody. We really look at what's fair and what's just. And as we focus on equality, as we focus on equity, we then will get to equality, right? So a lot of times people will talk about equality first, but you really need equity to get to equality. And then inclusion is the practice of giving people a voice and giving people a seat at the table and listening to what they are offering and helping people to see themselves in the decisions that are being made. So a lot of people bring a lot of ideas to the table. It's one thing to hear them. It's another thing to begin to implement those things that we've heard from the employees. And so that's the gist of the work that I do. And so in advancing diversity, one of the things we're going to call it is Metro Vibes, VIBES. And vibes really is, while vibes is a word unto itself, it really is valuing inclusion, belonging, equity, and sustainability. And so in my short time here, I've talked to lots of people and I'll say, what do you think about this? And everyone's like, yes, it's really cool. What is the vibe and what does it feel like to work at Metro? And one of the things we know that we are historically a diverse employer. We have been a diverse employer for a very, very long time. I actually met a gentleman who works here who started in 1965 and is still coming to work every day. So that is absolutely amazing that he's still here. And we also, are under the federal guidelines, and the EEO office actually reports into me. So Jan Bryan is the lead for that. We also have the board equity framework that you put together and worked on as well. And we have our workforce diversity. So we have, like I said, again, a lot of diversity across the board in all of the departments and divisions. And then when I came on board, the organizational realignment had happened. And so my role is to really come in and take much of the data from the past and then take us into the present. And so the work, while it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is really all about a culture change. And so how does my team and the team that we do work with, Sherry, how do we help the engagement and the culture to be the vibe of Metro so that we're not only working with our employees, but we're also working with our customers and our clients and constituencies. So on the next slide, really, when I looked at some of the data that was actually collected before I came in, there were 4 areas that I thought were really important, and it was really about leadership and culture. So how do we create trust and commitment among the leaders? That's one of the things that I hear that people are saying we need to prioritize DEI. It needs to be very visible. And while I will say, absolutely, there is a lot of things that are going on at Metro. Before I got here, there are a lot of good things that are going on, and I'm really sort of connecting all the dots to those good things and the things that are to come. We also talked about our talent. How do we pull the DEI efforts through the entire life cycle? And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next page. The infrastructure is about building a supporting structure for me, my team, to have the tools to be able to do the work and to be able to sustain it so that it's not resting just with me. I tell people that my role is to create a framework, but it's everybody's role to help bring diversity, equity, and inclusion to the table and to bring it to life. And then the analytics of it all is really like using the data to tell a story. And we have lots and lots of data, but we have to actually cut the data differently on different factors, because once you start to cut data differently, you get different stories. And so the experiences that employees have are not the same. Because we're all in different positions, coming with different backgrounds and perspectives. But the data will help us to know what's happening to groups of people, what's happening from a gender standpoint, what's happening from who's in leadership, who's not, what's happening for people wanting to go to leadership, and how do we help them get there. So this last page is really the focus that we're going to have. So under the Metro Vibes diversity strategy, we have 3 pillars, and people, culture, and business. And I went to school to be a kindergarten school teacher, so I like to keep it simple so that people understand it and can talk about it. So the people part is really about how do we integrate DEI into everything we do? How are we attracting our talent? Where are we looking for talent, bringing talent in? How are we developing that talent? And then how are we retaining that talent? Many times people leave organizations not because of the money or the salaries. They leave organizations because they don't feel included and or developed to grow into the positions that they're in. So that's one of the things that we're really going to focus on. We also want to make sure that we're building robust talent pipelines, and I think we could do continue to do recruiting at HBCU colleges, continue to really go and speak to high school students about work at Metro and opportunities at Metro. So part of my job is not only internal for the employee base, but also external in the community to talk to people about what we do and all of the different kinds of work work assignments that could be here. Some people have no idea that Metro does all the things that Metro does. So I'll get to be a champion for that. Under the culture, which is a big piece, and this is where the culture change really talks about our employee resource groups. And so I'm really proud to say that there were 2 existing resource groups when I came on board. We have a women's group and we have a veterans group. Since I've been here, we've launched our Hispanic ERG and an employee resource group, yay. And we're working right now for our Asian resource group and for LGBTQ resource group and an African ancestry resource group. So all of those are in the work right now, and we're working with the teams. I've talked to a few of our senior leaders to be executive sponsors, and people have stepped up to the plate for that, so I'm really happy about that. And part of that ERG platform, we'll also have a diversity council and the executive diversity council, as well as an advisory council for me, because I need to hear employees' voices in order to know, am I doing the things that are important for people? And so we'll put that together. And then with Sherry's team, we will work on coaching and mentoring. We've started doing some coaching and mentoring with individuals, but we're actually going to build out a bigger program to do coaching and mentoring and really helping people to say, where do you want to go? And this is how you get there, and here are the kinds of things you need to do. As well as we will do a lot of training on unconscious bias, on micro inequities, on a variety of things that we can talk about. On the business side, it really is building partnerships around the region, across the region, supporting the equity projects that are happening. We have quite a few equity projects that are happening within Metro, and one of the things I'm doing is cataloging all of the different pieces of work that's happening so that we can look at it holistically and not just a single project. And then how do we integrate diversity with our brand, and then how do we continue to support our customers in the best possible way? So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, your experience you bring to the table and bring to us definitely shows. Any questions for Sarah?
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. I can't believe it's been 8 months already.
I know.
Yesterday, but I guess it's been a while. Thank you for this overview. A couple of questions. One is, can you describe where you like sit within the org chart?
So I report into Sherry in PCI, and I have a dotted line to Randy.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Another question that I have is, I know, for example, like OIG has a hotline for waste, fraud, and abuse, and safety has a hotline for safety concerns. If an employee has a concern about equity or inclusiveness, or they're facing something in the workplace that they feel is inappropriate or offensive, what do they do? What resources are available to them? How do they bring it to your attention?
So a lot of employees will go to the EEO office, partly because EEO also was standing up diversity before I got here, so people kind of naturally go there. Within the team, on Sherry's team, we also have labor relations and EEO and myself. And so when a call comes in, and it can come in for any one of us, because I sometimes get calls as well, being new, people will call me, and then I'll talk to them and say, this is what's happening. We need to go and get more data. So any one of us can actually insert ourselves into that scenario for an employee.
Okay, and how do employees know who to call?
Well, we have on our website and in our directory the EEO, and we have information around the organization that lets them know that. When in doubt, right? Many people will just say, "I'm going to call PCI." Someone in PCI. A lot of times, people will get to me for somebody else, right? Because they know that's my role, and then I help to discern where this really needs to sit. So, and as I'm right now a little bit still behind the scenes, we're building out a structure where we're going to be more visible, more vocal about it. So I actually did a podcast early on when I got here, and I'll do another podcast in a couple of weeks or so to tell people where we are from where I started to where we are now, to really get people engaged in what we're trying to accomplish across the board.
Great. One last question about the data analytics. I know that you can look quantitatively at some of those diversity indicators, and I know that that's part of what we'll be looking at. How do you what are the analytics for the vibe, for the qualitative side of inclusion?
It's really about how do people feel, right? So when we did the engagement survey this year, we got 59% positive on people feeling that DEI was important and visible in the organization. And so you're right, and sometimes it's difficult. I mean, we can do analytics around how many people do we have, what's our breakdown around gender, our breakdown around races. But at the end of the day, when we're doing an engagement survey, it's like, how do people feel? And is this a place that you like working? Is it a place where you would tell other people to come and work, right? Those are some of the measures that you can do. And are you planning to stay in the organization, right? People kind of know where they sit. And so there are lots of different measures, but Sherry and I actually are going to be working on the whole diversity metric piece of it so that we can actually put those defining metrics on the page and then measure ourselves accordingly as we go throughout the year.
Great, thank you. I look for, oh, sorry, Sherry.
No, I was just going to add, we also do an exit survey for employees, and so that also provides us a lot of data around the reason why people are leaving. And then I'll start in December going to new hire orientation and presenting at new hire orientation so that we're talking to employees at the minute they join the organization so they understand what we're trying to do and then they know where to come. So a lot of our teams are presenting at new hire orientations to give them insight as to where they need to go and who to talk to.
This is great. I hope we can get sort of regular updates. I think having increased visibility for your role and the things you're doing is going to be really great.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Helfer.
Thanks. Thank you for your work. And I have a couple questions. One is, where would we find the list of ERG groups?
So we are working on that. That's part of the podcast that we're going to do, but we're working on getting logos
for the ERGs. So we'll have 6 total by the end of the year. So it'll be the women's, the veterans, Hispanic, Asian Pacific, and LGBTQ and African ancestry. Those will be the 6. One of the things I'm putting a call out is to other employees to figure out, like, what do you want to do? And the way the employee resource groups form is the employees actually come to me and ask me, is this something they can do? Which is great, because it's not me about saying this is how we're going to do it. It's really about the employees, and the employee resource groups are for them. So right now, the groups that we have together are working on their strategy and the things that they want to accomplish over the next year.
That's great. There's a lot of regional work going on equity. What's your vision for connecting the internal culture piece with the business piece, and really working to normalize conversations across our community about being more comfortable talking about racial equity, disability access issues, gender identity. I'm just curious what your vision is to move that, because we have so much work to operationalize our equity in the region.
So, I believe everything starts with a conversation and setting up the conversation in a way that people can be heard, and felt that they're listened to, and just really, saying, here's where we're going, here's what we're doing. It's a journey, we're definitely on a journey. But I think many times to explain people what it is, what we're doing, and how we're doing. I get invited to a lot of the meetings, and so I'm actually a sponsor for a couple of the equity projects that are happening around the organization. And as I'm out and about, I actually talk about it. We have a gender equity framework that we're working on right now that you'll hear about in January. And I get to be that person who tells the people about this. I get a lot of calls from externals. Can I come in and speak on different topics? And, I'll start doing more of that. I haven't done a lot of that since I've been here, but I'll start doing more of that, and then really connecting the dots for people around the equity work that we're doing and helping people to create the definitions that we can make standard across the authority. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Brana. Darlene, question for you. As you look at Vibe and some of these other initiatives, what's your interaction with the unions?
With the unions? So I did, when I first got here, I actually did a road trip to all of the bus divisions. So I went out to all of the bus divisions to speak to people. I did meet a couple of the union representatives. I've worked closely with the Local 2 union, and working with the MIC, and doing some work. So I still have to get more deeper into with the unions. I haven't met all of them yet, but I have met a few. And, in the beginning, it was just more of me introducing myself and what I'm trying to do. But as we go deeper, and actually as we build the ERGs, we really will need the union support to do that, so that people can come into different programs and know that it's a part of Metro. And I need their support to be able to do what I'm doing, because I'm working with the folks that are part of the union. So,
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
HC.
All right. Moving on, this year, a colleague of ours introduced the concept of sprints to Metro as a way for us to solve strategic problems in a dedicated time frame with cross-functional teams. The idea is that anyone at Metro can launch a sprint effort, and that the transformation office is working to make sure that they have the right guidelines and resources for these efforts to be successful. Once a problem has been identified, the team works across functions to discover root causes, value drivers, and most importantly, questioning the constraints on why things are done the way they are and how can we improve as an organization and as a team. The collective brainstorming and problem solving directly influence an action plan to optimize processes and resources, with the ultimate goal of increasing transparency and accountability into our core business functions that impact everything we do, and ultimately to deliver better service. Today, we have two teams that are going to provide an update on two core functions of our business, human capital and procurement. These teams do an incredible amount of work to keep much of our business moving, and it is critical that we collectively work toward continuous improvement as technology and priorities evolve. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Sherry Dickerson, our Chief People Officer, who will provide an overview on the human capital sprint that we did. Thank you.
Good morning, Sherry Dickerson, Chief People Officer. Our sprint was really focused on hearing from our stakeholders and identifying what their pain points were in our talent acquisition. And so with that, we had interviews with over 30 employees, mostly new hires, some hiring managers, as well as some of my team, some of whom were actually newer employees and could provide really valuable feedback. We also have been looking at various dashboards across the organization, kind of took a deep dive into our processes and documentation that we maintain, as well as looking at past surveys and kind of looking at where we sit compared to our peers and benchmarking organizations. Without much surprise, we found that providing visibility on the ability for new hires to be able to see where they are in the process was a big pain point for folks, as well as for the hiring managers. We get lots of calls in our department about where people are in the process, where their jobs are in the process. And so we're really looking forward to our ERP project because it will provide us with the visibility that we should have. Right now, a lot of things are paper driven, so it requires us to go back to emails or look through files to find the information and provide it to our clients. We will also be able to move this forward with the applicant tracking system that we're going to put in place. But part of what we heard was about attrition as well. We spoke earlier about the DEI project that's going on. That'll be helpful in a lot of ways for us. But part of what we did here was that people weren't really clear on what their career path could look like at Metro and how their skills and talents could be utilized in the future. And so we see in our data that the transition that people are making is a lot about the lack of clarity about career paths and how they can transition into new positions and whether or not there are positions that they can go to, especially if you're talking about frontline employees. Some of those jobs actually don't really have a clear path to what's next. And so we will be doing some work to make sure that employees are clear on that. So some of the work that we're looking to do is outlined in this spreadsheet. I'm not going to focus on everything. One of the major things that we decided to do was to do FAQs so that people can go into the system and do a query on, how long should it take for me to hear back on a particular job? And we have information in the system that will provide them with some guidance on if it's a certain type of position, then you can expect that it will take a certain amount of time. We're also doing some FAQs for bus operators. There needs to be more clarification around bus operators. If we put out an application to hire, once the candidate has put in their application, we can only take so many people into a class. So it may be a few months before they hear back from us on where they are in the process. They may have already gone through their background and done their medical, but we can't class them until there's an appropriate class for them to go into. And so some of those things are the things that we're kind of looking at and making sure that there's more transparency and more understanding and people that have clarity about what their rotation will look like in that process. Obviously, we need to streamline our processes. A lot of that will come out of our ERP project, but some of it will also happen for us as we integrate into a new applicant tracking system, and we'll be able to also update our job descriptions through an automated process that we bought a tool that will allow hiring managers to go in and do job descriptions in a much more efficient way. Also, we are building out a competency framework so that managers are clear on what expectations are and candidates understand what their career path can look like and how they can progress to the next level. So the competencies will be tied back to job descriptions, and employees can find a job that they're interested in, see what the competencies look like, go to our catalog, and start enrolling in those classes. And I think that'll be extremely helpful as we move forward and are able to maintain our talented teams. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions? Actually, I have one. On the slide you had with what you've heard, Sherry, do you ever hear from people who say we're external, not staff, but people external applying for, say, a position and didn't get it? Do you hear any feedback or comments back from folks like that, or do you ever reach out to folks like that to see what they think about the process to inform you?
So we do hear from them. Primarily, the issue is that we don't really have a process in place right now because we're so manually driven to communicate back to them when the job is closed and been filled. So with the system that will be built, we'll be able to provide them with more transparency and have more certainty when we send out emails to individuals on what their status looks like.
Okay, thank you. Tracy?
I keep hearing from colleagues that there's like all this new federal funding available for apprenticeships and other earn and learn pathways within the infrastructure sector. I know we have an apprenticeship program for like escalators or something, but like where are we on, like, say more about pathways. We need to think big about this.
We do. So we're working with 689 on some ideas around building apprenticeship programs across the board. There was one in maintenance. I believe we're standing that one back up. There was a time where there wasn't a lot of frontline activity going on. And so we just need to reconstitute some of those activities and make sure that there's clarity on how you get into the program, because I think that might have been somewhat of a concern, and making sure that we meet all of the guidelines and regulations. On the bus operator side, we run into a little bit of a snag because since you drive across jurisdictional lines here, Maryland, DC, Virginia, there are regulations around the age of someone who has a commercial driver's license and an endorsement for passengers. And so we're trying to figure out how we can make that work and still stay within the guidelines that exist.
I think it's great to think about this for like particular roles, but like, can we think bigger as an organization about earn and learn across job categories? Like, and are there opportunities for us to get federal funding to support this part of the transformation?
I believe there are probably opportunities for us to look into. I know that the government relations office does some work in that space. I see you leaning in.
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment on that. I appreciate that. So, for instance, on the bus side, when zero emission bus program, part of the funding in there is about training and the new whole dynamic about zero emission buses. So that is something we're in the process of working through right now. Lots of places in the industry are doing that. So that's Jeff Hyatt's role in bus transformation, working with Leroy and also working with Teresa and the training team and kind of working through that. And that'd be a collaborative piece with 689 as well. We have we have a program for rail vehicle maintenance and that kind of program. We have an elevator and escalator program. Now, this whole thing is really about exposing that we don't have well-defined career paths to a level that the size of this organization should have. So we have them, in places, we don't have them in other places, and we don't have a clarity for everybody. And a lot of this keeps coming back to transparency and process. So that's what this is really about. And a sprint is really this effective way everyone gets a room, acknowledges a problem, and solves it. And that's really all we really want to highlight here. It's not so much that these are like big items in front of the board as much as these are cultural shifts in the, if we'll back a house part of our organization that drive the front of house that we need to modernize and make more inclusive, more transparent, and make it so everyone here from kind of soup to nuts, cradle to grave, different analogy you want to use, has a home here and builds a career here.
That's right.
And that's how all this is being thought of. And so we can't turn the Titanic overnight.
No.
One of it is we've hired 1,300 people. Sherry and her team did an amazing job last year of just getting the ranks built back up. Now it's to kind of build better muscle memory around, and some of this is stuff Metro used to do well. And then the pandemic, for other reasons, kind of fell apart. Other things are, I think, our industry and culture have just evolved differently, and we need to be more robust and a better employer versus just maybe thinking of it as a utility. And our industry has been a very utility mindset for decades. So this is just to expose that we know this, and this is the stuff we are working on.
Okay, and I'm sure like 689 has their own set of concerns that like they're obviously like not here right now to speak to, but like it really makes sense that like of course they need to be a partner in like anything that's going to happen on this, and that's like kind of its own Titanic that it might not turn overnight, but like I really hope that this is something that they can get excited about, because the future of WMATA should be that we're like one gigantic earn and learn organization, not just like these teeny earn and learn programs within some departments.
Yeah, I think that's our general. Now, with that said, there are unique apprentice programs that like elevator escalator, because there's like state certification stuff. So
Gotta have that
we really
escalator.
want that kind of thing, and we're working with our state partners on that kind of thing. But with we're talking 689. This is really all unions, but like 689. Part of the CBA is around this topic too. So a good example is if we bring a custodian into the organization today, they have the least amount of career path. There's just not a lot of opportunity for a custodian to move through the ranks because of the way you move from bus operations to rail operations.
Or like an ambassador, or all these other roles that are like.
So those are part of, but there's gives and takes in the CBA in relation to hiring and whatnot. But these are all the things that I think are doing in a very collaborative way with the union. We hope to continue that way.
Great.
Done.
Yes, really glad to see your focus on career paths. And I know that Randy mentioned it a long time ago, that they wanted to look at Metro as a career and not just a job opportunity. So in view of the fact that the National Capital Region is rich in mass transit opportunities, in other words, you have a lot of competition for good quality talent, are you including a clear understanding of the region and opportunities in these career paths where perhaps some of our best and brightest work here, but if they hit a ceiling, can move into another organization in the region and perhaps come back at another time?
So we're doing our best to maintain a high visibility of our employee value proposition so that we don't lose them to some other organization and have them have to bounce back. That would be my preference. I know that there are certain areas that that's the only path forward. But we are working with mentors and mentorship programs and trying to develop buddy programs to help kind of foster a culture of learning so that people can grow within an organization and have a true career throughout our organization. We're a huge business with lots of opportunities. It's really exposing people to all of the various areas that we have so that they can figure out where their passion lies and how they want to grow.
That's great. And so my suggestion or my recommendation is looking at all of the different opportunities inside of Team Metro.
Mm-hmm.
Also look at those that have a ceiling that perhaps lend themselves to gaining opportunities for upward mobility elsewhere and then coming back. But at least lay that out for them so they can understand where they stand.
Thank you.
Sherry, I just have one last question. The timeline Several of these FY24 deadlines are coming up very soon.
And we are
Confidence
on.
level of putting check marks next to those?
Yes, we will be putting check marks next to these. A lot of them are tied to our ability to stand up our applicant tracking system.
Well, was going to be the
And
next
so
question.
we're looking at that to come online in February.
Okay. I'm testing now, I guess. Is that done?
So actually, we're in acquisition. It is an off-the-shelf product, and so standing it up shouldn't be as difficult as, say, an ERP where you have to do a lot of configuration.
Original work. Yeah. Okay, great.
Want to judge top priorities. Sherry will give more headcount until he gets
it. He's gonna go to Staples and look on the shelf and see what's there. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Thank you. And Suzette, they've given you the enviable position of cleanup here with procurement. Yeah.
Me?
Boy, just thinking of procurement as a sprint, that's very exciting.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. This is Suzette Moore. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer and very happy to be here this morning to talk about our procurement sprint. So we also had a lot of information come from our customers. What we heard mainly was, like some of the other conversations already, the limited visibility. So we're focused on transparency. Our customers wanted to know where their transactions were in the process.
Just closer.
Thank you. So another area, of course, inefficient processes. So we wanted to focus on our tools, and one of the main things was writing scopes of work. So we had specific initiatives that go towards that. Limited strategic partnerships, so more engagement with our customers. These were the areas that we knew we had to focus on moving forward. Procurement being driver in the whole process, we know that if we focus on better customer service, faster procurements, cost-saving measures, and also inclusive contracts, we would be that driver that Metro needs for the transformation process. So these were the areas that we wanted to focus on, and some of the areas that we had already been working on, we were able to put timelines in place to focus some of the initiatives. So moving forward, the recommendations were bucketed into 3 specific areas. Again, the transparency. We had some initiatives that were easy to put in place, such as workload reports, where people can actually see where their products were in the process. Somewhat of a manual process because we're moving towards the automation like we were talking about here, and I can arguably say I'm as excited about ERP as as my colleague Sherry, but we're very excited about that whole concept moving forward. A lot of manual processes still happening within my department, so the ERP would definitely address that. But what we're also talking about now is more engagement with our customers, whether it be external or internal. So one of the other initiatives is having quarterly meetings where we're talking to our customers about high priority projects and what we're doing to get those in place by a certain date. So more engagement on that level. Also, the conversations are about how our customers can help us. What is their role? Trying to demystify the process. What do they need to do to help us? So one of the areas that is a pain point for my team and also our customers is writing scopes of work. So we're focusing on that element and getting resources to help us with writing technical scopes of work for our customers, help them put those things in place that will enhance the pre-solicitation phase, which seems to be where a lot of the pain points are. So just transparency on that, streamlining the processes and being more engaged with our customers and talking about our processes and what they can do to help us to move the procurements along. Those 3 areas are where the focus is right now. A lot of the initiatives such as a dashboard, again, will address customer concerns, transparency, and that is being stood up by the end of, it was end of October, so it's already functional. It's up on our webpage, and our customers can see where their thing is. So that's about summing up the initiative that's going on in procurement right now. Questions?
First joined the board about 6 years ago. You know, it was incredible that how far this has come to today, and you were integral in that. So thank you for all this work. So that's
Thank you.
and in such an important part of what we do. So
I think the team is very, very excited. We're extremely excited about the support we're getting with everything that's moving forward. So we're pretty happy right now.
it's great. Okay. All right.
We're wrapping it up. Go to the next slide. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. So with all things transformation, our goal is to keep the customer experience at the core of what we do, both our internal and external customers. The Transformation Office has now officially been stood up for almost a year, and we are proud to keep growing and support all functions across the organization. With an enterprise collaboration approach, we are building internal capacity across departments to embrace and empower transformation in all things that we do, focusing on continuous improvement and cost effectiveness. So thank you for listening to today's updates, and happy to take any questions at this time.
Chair, I just want to make one quick comment here for if there's any board member questions. So one, I want to thank Kimmy for her leadership on this, and she's really just, you know, again, her job is to kind of be helping break down silos and connect people together. But Suzette and Sherry and their teams, I can't really say enough about how much they've leaned into this. This isn't like Randy saying you have to do this. It is trying to create the capacity around this, but the teams are really engaged. It's a healthy process here to see different levels of the organization really excited about change and understanding that the stuff they do, they now have the ability to change what they do, not getting someone else to tell them they can do it. And that's starting to pay some dividends. This is that cultural stuff again. No one taking a bus or train will ever see these things, but they fundamentally change how we deliver the organization, and they have long-lasting staying power doing well. So I'm just really proud of the team on this stuff, considering, again, everyone is focused on this other external stuff, and I just want to publicly recognize how good the team is doing on this.
Tracy.
I also want to emphasize how these things are related and just encourage all of my board colleagues to, like, as we're having these conversations about our fiscal cliff, et cetera, this stuff is deeply relevant. Our appointing authorities and our stakeholders want to hear about how WMATA is being managed differently. And we need to be owning and communicating all of this incredible work that this amazing leadership team is doing and letting people know that the strategic transformation plan is not just a document that we slap together in order to comply with a legislative requirement in one jurisdiction, that this is like a real transformation that is yielding dividends. This is exciting stuff. And I think we need to be telling this story.
Great. All right. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Good job, everyone.
Thanks.
With no further business to come before the committee, we will stand adjourned. Thank you for joining us. The board will now move to executive session, and I have a request to convene in accordance with the bylaws. I, Paul Smedberg, request that the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A, budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, WMATA contracts, and or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions or the federal government, and C, personnel or labor issues, including discussions of labor contracts and labor negotiations, consideration or interviews of candidates for employment, and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, or resignation of individuals. All in favor? Seconded by Dr. Lowe. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? Thank you so much.